Hello and welcome to the final video of this year's Halloween in July. We're still running that special on the Patreon where any new pledges of at least $5 get an extra special spooky card. Yearly rates have also been slashed as low as they'll go, so now's the time to get in on all the benefits you can get from being a member over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder, such as early access to videos and deciding what video I'm gonna make next. So today we're gonna cover an institution in the freeware horror scene and all internet-based horror in general. SCP Containment Breach. So just to get those of you who aren't up to speed on things in the loop, SCP is an internet-based horror wiki where over the last, we're getting close to 15 years now, various users who claim to be researchers, administrators, and other individuals involved with the Foundation post dossiers on various things that the SCP Foundation either has in containment or is keeping tabs on in order to make sure that civilians and government entities alike don't discover or interact with them. As a quick disambiguation, or else we're going to get a little confused here, SCP has two meanings depending on the context of the initialism. If you're referring to the Foundation as a whole, SCP stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, the MO of the Foundation. If you're referring to an individual SCP, such as SCP-173, who was the first to ever be posted, SCP will stand for Special Containment Procedure. Although some people say like Special Containment Protocol, I'm not sure if there's like one or the other, but you get the idea. So, who made this nightmare fuel refinery? Well, outside of the original authors of each SCP who are credited in the README, Containment Breach is the work of one Regalis, who saw that really cool SCP-087 game we all dared each other to play back in the day on YouTube, made a better version of it, and then decided to just go on and make a full-blown game out of a containment breach scenario in the Foundation. The first build was posted in mid-2012, and if you're curious about how it looked, back in the day, Meme Man Critical did a video of it during his gameplay and commentary era. Back then, it was just you and 173 in an ever-changing facility, though. Later on, there were a few more SCPs thrown into the mix, but for a while, the game was essentially just finding SCP-912 and seeing what happens when you throw various things into it. Now in the final version of 1.3, there's a whole host of terrifying entities to avoid for as long as possible while the facility implodes around you, and staying anywhere for longer than a few moments is a very, very bad idea. Nowadays, Regalis has a studio called Undertow Games who are currently working on Barotrauma, which as I understand it, some call Space Station 13 Under the Sea, and while I can't personally affirm that, it seems to be going pretty well for them over at Undertow. Okay, before we go any further, it's confession time. This game was too spooky for me. There. I said it. I grew up reading all the original SCP files as they were being made, which resulted in a budding adolescent Charl having a lot of nightmares involving 173, 96, and 106, who all just so happen to be prominently featured in this game. Lucky for me, this young fascination with the Foundation means that I followed the game when it was being made and even remember a lot of stuff about it as it was being developed. I remember the reason why I stopped paying attention after a while was because Regalis had to put the game on hold for about a year because he had to do some sort of compulsory military service. I think that was nearly 10 years ago, and I'm entirely open to the idea that I misread that or I'm thinking of another indie horror title from the early 2010s. Fret not though, as I faced my fears and got enough of this game played recently so that I'll have footage and a refreshed memory of how this game never fails to make me sweat constantly and jump right out of my seat. One last thing before we get into the gameplay features. Containment Breach is an old game on an old engine. The README says as much, and if it wasn't clear already, it has a hard time running on modern systems and your mileage might vary if you try and play this. As far as my personal experience goes, which by the way, for reference, I'm running this game on Windows 10 that is regularly kept up to date, I found that what worked well was setting the game to run under Windows 7 compatibility mode in borderless window. It ran fine just like that, however, trying to run it out of the box results in the game booting up but not showing on the screen or responding to your prompts, forcing you to go into the task manager and force stop the app. I'll check the PC Gaming Wiki and see if there's a page for Containment Breach over there, and if there is, I'll link it in the description for y'all. So, first and foremost, SCP Containment Breach is a, oh no, Frisk, not now. I know you need to rub your cheeks against the microphone because you think you own it and that's your territory, but how about you sit with Daddy and we can make a video together? I'm just gonna cradle you like a little baby. There we go. Alright, where were we? So, first and foremost, SCP Containment Breach is a roguelike at its core, and this time I'm using the correct terminology. I'm sure there's going to be at least one actually post in the comments, as those are unavoidable on youtube.com though. The game is randomized every time you play it, and the only connecting thread is how the game starts at the beginning of every run. The guards will usually say something different every time too, just to keep things interesting. Oh no, there he goes. Alright. Sorry about that again. Where were we? The guards will usually say something different every time too, just to keep things interesting. As far as I can tell, there's no collecting items that will unlock in later playthroughs, no beating bosses to add new things to the pool, and no making it easier on yourself in subsequent runs in any way other than just getting good. The only real modifiers that might make the game easier or harder is sometimes you'll get a seed where you start right next to SCP-912 and there's a level 2 keycard nearby. Sometimes you'll be trapped between a rock and where SCP-96 is hanging out. There are 4 different difficulty levels that you can choose from that determine where and when you can save and so on, but nothing's gonna make subsequent runs easier outside of skill and difficulty settings. There's a conversation to be had about how roguelites are much better for longevity and giving the player a reason to keep playing, but let's not have it here. So there are 3 major things you'll need to manage when playing Containment Breach, and the first 2 are arguably so similar that they can be wrapped into one category: blinking, your line of sight, and inventory. The first is the oldest and most straightforward mechanic in the game. Blinking was first introduced in the initial build of the game as Containment Breach was initially, in Regalis' own words, a simple jump scare fest resolving around SCP-173. Blinking is the first mechanic you'll learn as you're plopped right into the Containment Breach scenario as you're cleaning 173's cell. Blinking is pretty simple. You have a meter that slowly goes down until it hits 0. You press space to blink, which refills the meter. Or if there's some sort of fault in the power in the facility that briefly kills the lights, it'll reset the meter again. If any of those things happen when SCP-173 has a clear path to get to you, you are dead. Start a new run. If you're lucky, you can find a bottle of eye drops that will increase the time you can keep your eyes open between blinks. There might even be something else you can do to help you out in this respect, but I for one did not run into them during my playthroughs. Then there's line of sight. Line of sight is also important since SCP-173 runs on Weeping Angel rules, but there's more to it than just avoiding death by sculpture. There's lots of things in the Foundation that you would do well to absolutely not look at, and you'll need to keep your eyes and ears open for contextual clues as when it's time to glue your eyes to the floor. Finally, we've got inventory management, which is simple enough. You can only carry so many items, and Containment Breach subscribes to the doctrine of rocket launchers and small gemstones take up the exact same amount of space in your pockets. It's easy enough to drop stuff, just drag the item out of your inventory slots, and then pick up what you want to take instead. There's all sorts of stuff you can find in the Foundation, ranging from stuff that is very useful to things that you can just immediately toss out, such as your D-subject briefing. Along the way, you'll find SCP files on various entities in containment, which can be pretty helpful for a time while you're still getting a feel for what's in the facility with you, and even once you memorize them all, picking them up is still a good idea as it's a good way to tell what's nearby you, and also sometimes guards will write key codes and other clues on them. Then there's all sorts of stuff you'll find at the Foundation, such as gas masks, people's wallets, key cards, batteries, and even a tracker device that can be upgraded in 912 to run indefinitely and give you a map with the exact location of all SCPs in the Foundation. That last one can be hard to come by though. Outside of those mechanics, there's one other thing you'll need to weigh the benefits of, which in most other cases is a no-brainer. Do you or do you not close doors behind you? In most horror games, it's a pretty easy question to answer, and it's a yes, because every barrier between you and the spooky thing will buy you precious seconds to get further away from it, especially when you consider that most of those games are at least in some way linear, meaning that if you get far enough away from the spooky thing, it gets bored and decides it'll try again like in 15 minutes. This is not the case in Containment Breach. The Foundation is all one level, all one instance, meaning that while you can eventually shake an SCP, that doesn't mean they're gone, and there's a chance that something you need is back in the area where you last encountered 173, meaning that you'll have to double back eventually. Also, when it comes to encounters with 173, if you shut a door behind you and then find yourself in a room with it, that's almost always a game over, as you'll have to turn around to reopen that door, which is the last thing you want to do in 173's presence. If you're lucky, the room both of you are in could have another door open that you can walk through without taking your eyes off 173. However, walking into a room without looking at what might be inside is also a very bad idea, even if it is better than just dying. Also, pro tip, blink before you open any door that's in front of you, just in case. On the flip side, certain entities like SCP-106 require you to close every door that you come across, as it's the only thing that slows it down enough for you to elude it, as while 106 can permeate walls and solid objects, it has to slow down to do so. For me, I found that the best course of action was to look after I opened a door to see if there was a clear escape route from my vantage point, and if there was, I go ahead and close that door behind me. If not, I keep the door open until I could be sure that there were no threats in the room. So, what about them spookies? Well, it's SCP, and all killer no filler at that. You won't be encountering any of the bad SCPs or the unfunny joke ones. It's all spooky. All the time. We've all seen before in various YouTube videos and on the site itself that there's no shortage of crappy SCPs to meme on, but none of them are going to be encountered in whatever containment site you're at right now. You drew the short straw and you got sent to the site where they keep all the nasty stuff. 173, 96, 106, 79, that wiggly boy that keeps on popping up in my peripherals, and I think 682 is here too, but I never encountered it in this build due to my own bad luck. I remember seeing screenshots of 682 tearing out the place as some sort of set piece in an earlier build back in the day, but I don't know if that made it into 1.3. And the point is, it's an all-star lineup of terrors from the Foundation, and you're considered an easy target by all of them. Having a good roster of spooky monsters is only half the equation though. Plenty of games have really good antagonists and end up doing nothing with them, which is why you see a lot of games where the monster is more popular than the game itself, or why a lot of creepypastas are essentially, hey, check out how scary this thing is. Containment Breach absolutely does not suffer from that sort of problem, as every SCP you come across is used about exactly how you'd expect them to act in the event that they were let loose with lots of Foundation personnel to do whatever they please with. You are never safe when you're in the Foundation. If you aren't being chased by one SCP, you're likely about to walk right into another one. If you found yourself a quiet moment, you've likely got about 10 to 30 seconds before 106 pops its head into the room. If you want to survive, you always have to be moving and be aware of your situation. There is one thing, however, that seems to work consistently in prolonging your life, at least for a while, when you're in the Foundation. Going, nope, and getting the hell out of whatever potential situation you might find yourself in. Hear the sound of concrete rustling through the next door? Nope, go the other way. 173 seems to board easily and will go find other people to kill if you don't want to be an easy mark. And I swear it can somehow move through the vents. Hear the sound of crying somewhere in the next room over? Nope! Find another place to explore until you can find something that might help you have an idea of exactly where 96 is so that you don't accidentally look in its general direction. See 106 pop its head out of the floor? Big nope. You're about to find out that this D subject you play as is a 2-pack-a-day smoker, but you'll try getting the heck out of Dodge, damn it. Nope. It will only get you so far though, as the SCPs can only be avoided for so long and they seem to get wise to your tactics. If you keep avoiding the same areas where SCPs are hanging out, they'll eventually close in on you by virtue of moving a little closer to your buffer zone each time you run away, and you'll have all the roaming baddies in the same spot at once, and then it's gonna happen. You'll have the Holy Trinity. You know where 912 is, you've got yourself the mapping device, and you found a level 2 keycard so you can get in. You're making a beeline for 912, and you know if you hold still for too long, something's gonna show up and you're gonna be in a problem, so you gotta get there fast. You get in there and, oh, what a surprise. Just as you drop the tracker into the input chamber of 912, 106 shows up. Crap. That's a problem. But once you shake it, you can double back and get your SCP tracker. There's one other problem though. You've been nope-ing so much that all the aggressive SCPs are close by, and you end up getting pincered by 173 and 106, since you'll be in a situation where you can't elude one without getting eaten by the other. I swear 106 and 173 are coordinating because this happened to me several times. Even when something isn't chasing you, this game is terrifying. Everything is so tense between the maze of claustrophobic hallways and the endless doors that you can't have any way of knowing what's on the other side of, since as far as we know, it's an SCP jailbreak and everyone's trying to get out. The few times you're in an open area, the short draw distance makes it even worse than the hallways, because at least when you're in those, you can see to the end of the room. 173 loves to hide around blind corners at the end of open rooms, so that makes it even worse. A lot of this game isn't even you being directly chased by the SCPs, it's a lot of wandering through halls, hoping you can get far enough from the last one you encountered to where you can take a second to try and figure out where you are now, which isn't an easy feat since, as we alluded to earlier, SCP-970 is in play, so sometimes you'll end up walking in circles. Containment Breach really nails down that balance of high-octane terror as something is chasing you versus constant dread whenever you're alone, anticipating the next thing that's gonna try and get you. And now, for one last time this month, let's give a little love to our sponsor for this video, Acheron. Acheron is a grimpunk fantasy tabletop game that takes inspiration from the SCP Foundation, with all sorts of shadowy organizations doing everything in their considerable power to hide the secrets of the world from the general public and others who might do wrong with them. Until now, someone did a big ol' oopsie whoopsie, and the barrier that was in place to keep all the extra spooky stuff at bay broke, meaning that it's a proper gold rush for adventurers and sleuths like you and your party. All sorts of curious minds might be joining you on your adventures in Acheron, as the previously mentioned shadowy organizations trying to keep the secrets of the world as just that now have bigger issues to take care of, so they went ahead and let people study history again, meaning that there's also quite a bit of an opportunity for aspiring archaeologists in the world of Acheron. So roll up those characters and get ready for some spooky encounters. Don't worry, by the way, of getting yourself into a pigeonhole. Acheron has a freeform leveling system where you spec into what you want to spec into. Follow the link in the description to pre-order Acheron, and whether you opt for the PDF or the hardcover book, you'll get access to the beta so that you and your friends can start rolling and exploring right away. As far as story is concerned in SCP Containment Breach, I'm not really sure there is one at all, but I have to consider myself an unreliable source here, as I was never able to get very far in my runs, on one account because I was too spooked, and also because I suck. Lucky for me though, this game's been in its final build state for a while now, has a fully fleshed out wiki, and some nice folks have summarized the plot and ending on it for folks like me who can't quick switch their weapons. The story is kind of what I gathered it to be based on the hints on the loading screen that feature SCP and lore factions that don't really appear in the early game or at all. Essentially, the story goes, the Chaos Insurgency is at it again and have infiltrated the Foundation's newest site where they're keeping all the nasty stuff locked up. The admin of this facility you're in is playing around with the idea of a modular containment facility that could easily be rearranged and refitted to contain whatever the Foundation needs that facility to contain. Nearly everyone is telling the admin that this is a bad idea for a myriad of reasons, including security issues, the increased risk and severity of containment breaches in the site, and it just kind of sucks for the staff. The Chaos Insurgency infiltrators are telling the admin that it's a great idea though, which is exactly what the admin wants to hear, so they're going ahead with the modular facility. Surprise, surprise, this is all going according to the Insurgency's plan. One of the spies gets the guard on duty to wander away from SCP-106's containment facility for a minute, and they let him out to wreak havoc on the facility. Before anyone can realize what actually happened though, the Chaos Insurgency members also sneak into SCP-79's containment area and gives it that sweet Ethernet cable. 79 waits for just the right moment to reveal it's got access to the whole facility, which is right as a fresh batch of D subjects are cleaning out SCP-173's cell. And that's where we come in. After like a million tries, you're faced with two options in order to get yourself out of this rapidly deteriorating situation. Either make a bargain with SCP-79 to get access to a potential escape route, or let SCP-682 out of its cage and just run like hell. How well either of these plans go for you depends on if you were able to complete complementary objectives to your chosen path. The best case scenario for you is that you make it out alive but are immediately caught by a mobile task force and you get designated an SCP yourself, as some of the facility staff have noticed that your survival skills are a little too good to be possible, and they think you might be able to manipulate some sort of time loop or something to move yourself into more survivable situations. The end. As for my recommendation, that's going to be a 100% yes. Even if you don't know too much about SCP, this game is still terrifying, and on top of that, it's free. You can get it from Undertow's website or on the SCP website too, I think, and as long as you follow the tips I talked about earlier in this video, you should be fine to get it running. Who knows, maybe one day if the stars align and Undertow wraps up Barotrauma, they might remake this game in Unity or something else that's a little more accessible on modern day systems if we ask nicely. Emphasis on nicely there, do not harass game devs, and if they don't want to do it, that's all fine. Maybe someone else will remake Containment Breach, but I just love to see it on a modern system. Hey everybody, so real quick addendum here. So it turns out there is, or perhaps there was, a Unity engine remake of SCP Containment Breach in development, or well, there was, like I said. I discovered this because I went on to PC Gaming Wiki to find you that little page to help you guys get this game running on your own, and I got really excited when I saw that autocomplete said SCP Containment Breach Unity. But then I clicked through to the wiki page on the Unity version and it said it was abandoned. I'm like, oh wait, really? When did that happen? So I clicked through to the site where the Unity version of SCP Containment Breach is being hosted, and it turns out that I don't know when the development was started, but as of January of this year, development has been abandoned because of health reasons, it says. I can't really comment any more to that because I simply do not know, but allegedly, according to some Reddit posts, other members of the team that do not have various health issues are trying to make other SCP-related games that focus on like more, as they put it, intense experiences around single SCPs, but I haven't seen anything. And again, this news is relatively new. This was about 6 months ago that this all went down. It's a bummer. Sorry, guys. Well, that's gonna do it for Halloween in July 2021. I'm extending that Patreon promo for 1 more week so that we'll get some of the stragglers in there for that sweet card. Before we go, I think I owe you guys a bit of an explanation as to why I disappeared for just over 2 months before we started back up again. So, as some of you know, around this time last year, my wife and I got the news that she had been accepted into veterinary school. It was very, very late notice though, as we were initially told that short of force majeure, there was no room on the wait list for her. But what do you know? COVID happened and somebody backed out of the roster, opening up a space for my wife to realize her dream. I had all of 45 days to cancel our current plans to try and move out to Texas with the rest of my family and figure out our entire living situation in the Midwest. And what I initially thought was good luck, I found a place that got back to me pretty quickly with all the paperwork and had no problem setting me up despite not being able to go out there and tour the place thanks to the pandemic being at its height. Driving out there when we made the move was terrifying, by the way. The whole thing happened really fast, and once we got everything packed, we left on a Tuesday, got there by Friday to move in, and then my wife started school the following Monday. Things were pretty nice at first, and there was even the pleasant surprise that our first month of rent was going to be free, which in hindsight should have been an immediate warning about how dire the situation of this apartment complex was. We eventually found out through the new management that took over about, 8 months later, who are now desperately trying to bring the place back up to spec, that the management company that owned the place when we moved there decided they wanted to cut their losses and sell the place shortly after we moved in, which meant doing as little maintenance as they could get away with until they found a buyer, since they didn't want to put any more money into the place. Around January was when we started to notice how bad things were getting there. The huge hole in the fence that a drunk driver took out the night before we moved in never got fixed. In fact, I had to go by my old place recently and it's even worse now. The light in our hallway went out sometime in October, and the one maintenance guy they still had on staff was either too busy to fix it or just apparently couldn't be bothered. And I can't fault him because I was told the poor dude left after realizing that management wasn't planning on hiring any more people to keep the place running, and it was just him with an overwhelming amount of work. Also, there was this terrible smell that was coming from the first floor, which eventually got so bad we had to start running air purifiers in every room alongside heavy-duty air fresheners like you'd find in a concert venue's bathroom. Apparently, we had some extremely neglectful dog owners on lower floors in the building, which management is still trying to get the smell out of the concrete to this day. And if the smell, the constant screaming at all hours from trashy neighbors who leave beer bottles in the hallway, the complete lack of a maintenance department to the point that I had to recaulk my own bathroom to make sure we didn't accidentally flood the guy below us, and also having the building right out on a street with no sound barriers where there were a lot of industrial stuff happening and crackheads who like to hang out and scream while people rattled their trunk at us at 1 a.m. If that all wasn't enough, there were the fire alarms. At first they only happened once a month and it was written off as some idiot smoking in the hallway or someone really botching their Thanksgiving dinner, but eventually they happened too often for us to ignore, and we got on first name terms with our fire department. While we didn't want to move around too much when we initially came out to the Midwest, by February we decided that we would move out when our lease was up, but that changed in March when there was a fire alarm coming from the laundry room that I ended up being the one to put out. Some of you might have seen the YouTube stories I made after the fact on that one. After whatever the heck was going on with the dryer happened, which was weird because there was nothing in it when I checked it, we put in a notice to terminate our lease the next business day and found a new place that's much better. Luckily, I had already been looking for new places when this all went down, and we had just under 70 days to make this move thanks to the termination policy, which was easy as pie compared to the last time. But it meant that I had to drop everything to get us out of that place. We were vindicated about abandoning ship too pretty quickly, as there were 3 more fire alarms in the span of the month, and we also found out there was a crackhead breaking into the utility room to squat, and he'd leave the space heater that was used to heat the pipes during winter on, which didn't help anyone's concern about this place being a tinderbox. If anything, I might have had it easy, as when I saw my neighbors during our evacuations, I learned that some didn't have functioning appliances, and one lady told me they never bothered to put cabinets in their kitchen. When I left, not a single person in that building had plans to renew their lease, and some were thinking about terminating early like I did. It was so bad that 2 weeks after I blasted the dryers with a fire extinguisher, the laundry room smoked out again at 2 in the morning. So when I called the fire marshals to ask them if they could do something about the building, I got told that not only only were they already on it, but essentially every health and safety organization in the county was scrutinizing my building, and the only reason why drastic action hadn't been taken was that the new owners were really dedicated to trying to fix the place, which to their credit, the building improved a lot since they took over, but not enough for me to spend any longer than I absolutely had to living there. We made the move in early June, and as I write this, things have been like night and day. Our new place is really nice. It's quiet, and we've got central AC now, which is the best thing ever. As some of you know, I made all these videos in advance so I can take the month of July off to rest, and I'm also getting some proper therapy now to help unpack what has been the gnarliest 10 months of my life so far, and a lot of other things went down too while all this apartment stuff was happening. I really can't thank all those of you who stuck with me enough while I blipped out of existence for a few months, especially the saucy ones. It's been a nightmare of a year, but I think that nightmare is finally over. So thank you all for joining me and listening to my ramblings about what's been going on in my life. Sorry I disappeared for 2 months. Stay tuned as I finally get around to making the patron voted video, which is easily the worst immersive sim ever made, and then we'll get that belated 100,000 subscriber special out of the way before we get into Indie-ween. In the meantime, stay safe, stay indoors, wear a good hat and some sunscreen when you gotta go out, and always check the toilet for the butt ghost. Enjoy this cat video. Oh, what is this? What is this? Is this your new hiding spot? Your new little hidey hole? I was moving stuff around because I need to disassemble that desk for the move, and Frisk has taken to this new little hidey hole. I completely removed this drawer here because it was nothing but like extra wires and stuff, so I just put that in a box to save me the hassle of like taking it all out, putting it in a box, and putting it back in. And Frisk has taken to this quite well. You liking your new lurking zone? It's over there. Yeah, that's a surge protector. We shouldn't be tampering with that. May I offer you a toy? Oh no, going after the toy would mean leaving the new hidey hole. Alright. Oh. We'll just leave it there. You know what else is nice about this hidey hole? It's a short distance away from the snack bowl, which is unfortunately empty. Because you gobbled it up too fast. Oh, it's also, you got Flamingo right there, hanging out with you. Do you like a scritch? Okay, no scritch. I'll just put this here so you can rest your paws on it. Alright, I'm gonna start moving a bunch of stuff around and disassembling things. You enjoy your new hidey hole, Frisk.
Man, I'm hungry. Hey, today's pizza day down at the cafeteria, right? Actually, I think it's tuna casserole. Oh, god damn it. Well, my day's ruined. The only reason I still come here is for the pizza. I don't know what it is about that pizza, but it's delicious. Tuna casserole, on the other hand, is a disgusting abomination, and it should be locked up in here with the rest of these freaks.